And everyone in life goes through troubles and challenges, right? But then I realized early on, it's just overcome it. Business, especially in life, you have to overcome the problems. Okay, one way or the other.
The world is constructed in a way that it doesn't matter what my situation is. I have to look at what cards are on my table and then play them the best way that I can.
Talking about selling 10,000 to 15,000 a month on that product. Okay.
I hear so many stories of other kids who have, whether it be a passion or a hobby or an interest or something, and whether it be financial situation or what, but sometimes they don't even get to listen to their kid. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Caravan Podcast. And today we're joined from a brother coming in from California here in Dallas, Texas. We appreciate you joining the show. Riaz Surti, co-founder, entrepreneur of Hearty Foods. Welcome to Dallas.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we're really excited to kind of talk to you about your journey, especially, in the consumer product space. I think it's a very interesting area, and I think it's constantly booming. I think, growing up back in like 2007, 2008, I think one of the first ones I remember was like Hint Water. I don't know if that was like the first official CPG product that was like you order online. But I think that's kind of when it started transitioning. And, my background was in nutrition, and food is something I'm very passionate about. And so, hearing about your journey and what you've built, I think is absolutely remarkable because you're focusing on so much of things that are necessary for everyone, not just Muslims themselves, right? Just giving really high quality products. Could you run us through like what exactly is that you've built and what it is?
Hearty Foods is a supplement brand, a wellness company, and we started off with making collagen, gelatin, and cholesterol. And this was during the height of the epidemic, COVID epidemic in 2020. And my initial products were 2019. We're making flours out of fruits and vegetables, FLOUR. Okay, and so and then the COVID came around 2020. We were selling a lot of flour, and then 2020, I said let me try doing some halal supplements, especially collagen, gelatin, and cholesterol. Okay, and these were products that you weren't able to find in the marketplace. In fact, I had a hard time sourcing it. Okay, and so I had met this one company, and I asked him, how come no one's promoting halal? You have halal certification for this product, right? He said that he doesn't understand why. Okay, and then when I purchased my first pallet of it, okay, he said, why don't you purchase another pallet of gelatin with it? And I said, I didn't know what gelatin was for. Okay, and he said, well, it's like collagen but gels. Okay, and I had no idea that one product was going to be $1 million product. That gelatin, I bought it as an afterthought, in a lot of ways, and then it was the first product to ever hit #1 on Amazon. A halal product hit #1 on Amazon, and so we held that spot. So we kind of that one product really we're talking about selling 10,000 to 15,000 a month on that product. Okay. And
what was the margin on that you were?
I mean the margin. I mean, it's everything about supplement business. It's a high margin business.
Okay.
And because like with flour, I'm selling 2 to 3x. Okay, with supplements, it's sometimes 4 to 5x. Okay, so you have to have margins to especially on Amazon. Okay, and or any business because if you don't have margins, you're gonna have to. You're not gonna be profitable. Okay, and I just as a business person, as an entrepreneur, you have to be profitable every way to go, every step of the way, from the beginning to the end. Okay, and most people think, oh, you should be unprofitable, and then it's just a lot easier if you're profitable. Okay, and so I guess my journey really was finding products that wasn't available, like collagen, gelatin, bone broth, and I started in 2020 these products, right? So, and I was the first one to ever do it. I think there's a lot more people coming into the space, okay, which is good, but I know that I've always pioneered from the very beginning, and I've always been doing halal from day one, from every business I've had. So
I mean, that's incredible. I mean, your business is relatively young, all things considered, right? You mentioned you kind of started your journey right in the beginning of the pandemic. So before all of that, before starting that chapter, were you always an entrepreneur, ever since you were young? Did your parents or your family kind of instill that into you? What kind of took you down this path? Because, I think a lot of us always have, business ideas, whether it be profitable or not, who knows? But getting the courage and confidence to do it, where is that coming from for you?
My journey begins, I was 16 years old, and I told my father, and I told my father that I wasn't doing well in high school. In fact, I was failing high school. Okay,
And did you grow up in the U.S.?
yeah, I grew up in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
And my dad was he was a great dad, and he said, just go get a job at the local Kentucky Fried Chicken down the street. Okay, and I think his whole goal, he's a CPA by trade, but his whole goal was to maybe get scared straight. Okay, go to high school, and then go to work at KFC, and think, oh man, this is a terrible job, and go back to high school again and start getting better grades. Okay, and what ended up happening was I ended up loving that job. So I started working. So I started working for 2 years, and I became assistant manager, and then I find out that KFC is for sale, the franchisee selling that store. So 2 years later, I tell my dad, can you look at this, look at the books, and can you buy it for me?
And you were what, 18 at this
I
time?
was 18 at the time, yeah. Okay, and so my dad looks at the numbers and said, yeah, it's a good business. And then he purchased a restaurant for me. Okay, and it was an amazing thing for And then
How did
There's
that?
a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. How? I mean, wow. I mean, I think your dad. I mean, of course, he's your father, but he took a bet on you and he listened, right? Like,
yeah.
how did that feel at that time? Like, because I hear so many stories of other kids who have, whether it be a passion or a hobby or an interest or something, and whether it be financial situation or what, but sometimes they don't even get to listen to their kid, right?
Yeah.
Were you taking it for granted at that time? Were you like, oh wow, or was it like, how does that feel in hindsight of that moment?
No, I had the world's greatest parents, to be honest with you. I think most people don't realize as your parents. I think I won the lottery when it came to parents, and I think most people's success usually stems, from other people who've helped them, and for me, it's my parents. Okay, and so what happens? My dad, he buys a restaurant, and then a month later, my dad passes away. So I knew, and my mom was devastated. My family was devastated by that. Okay, and then one of the things we had to do was when we bought that restaurant, we had to do an image enhancement, do a remodel. Okay, and I remember giving the deposit to the contractor, and he took the money and ran, so I just saw the look on my mother's face. It was so, first she lost her husband, and then the contractor, kind of scammed us. And I remember that when I saw my mother's face, I knew that no one's going to save me financially. Okay, and it's like a tipping point, they call it, right? So, and so I just said, I told my mom, I'm not gonna fail. Okay, and there was no plan B for me. Okay, and that's when everything became very real in a lot of ways, huh? Okay, and then I came up with this concept called ABC, which is always be cool. Okay, and so I told my mom, listen, let's get a home loan. Okay, let's get the get the restaurant back up again, and then once that restaurant was built, okay, and I bought my second restaurant, my third restaurant, my fourth restaurant, and I started buying Taco Bells. So that's what happened from that. Yeah.
So I mean, there's a lot to talk about on like the journey that you have, but one of the things that I think sounds like a very pivotal moment is like you're 18, your dad buys like the first investment into like your future potential and career, and he passes away. And are you like the eldest? Do you have siblings? What's kind of the family structure like at this point, right?
I had an older sister and I have an older brother, and my sister had passed away a few years ago.
Okay.
Okay, and then what happened was when my dad
from now or during that time?
No, she passed away in 2019.
Okay.
And so once I got the KFC, and then my sister got married off and went to New York. Okay, and my brother, he was around, but he wasn't a pivotal role in the business. I think he may have been. I think he may have some challenges of me buying the restaurant or the family money being used to buy this restaurant. So I think there were some challenges there for him.
I'm just thinking back about, and like Naveed's father has passed away at a very young age. My father passed away at a very young age. I mean, it's a very challenging situation. So for me, like my dad was 21, or I was 21. Week after my 21st birthday, my dad passes away. Yeah. I was like the eldest in my family, and I kind of had the same mentality of like the real world really hit. And I had like these entrepreneurial spirits and things that I was always involved with and doing, but it's like different when your back's against the wall and you really have to wear your big boy pants and, you know, I've got a family to feed. Like that type of gravity and weight, it's like, I don't have any choice but to be successful. Like, did you feel that way? And how did you manage the stress of that responsibility, the gravity of that, especially when you're like 18, 19, right?
Yeah. Oh, I realized very, very easily. I think part of it is that it's, you know, if you don't do it, it's gonna be devastating consequences. When you understand that devastation, okay, that's kind of like a high motivation. So I think that the concept of ABC, always be cool, became very, very critical. And cool meaning not cool not only in good times and having fun and laughing, you know, but cool under pressure. Okay, I just kept saying to myself ABC. So what ended up happening was, you know, I call it face the music in a lot of ways, you know. So when you were remodeling a restaurant, okay, you know, just answer every call, talk to every contractor, don't dodge calls, you know, just face the music. Yeah, and if you continue to just address the problem, right, what happens is that people feel confidence that you're not you're not dodging any responsibility that you have, right? Okay, and tell people, you know, the truth in a lot of ways. And there's the hadith of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who said that, you know, tell the truth even if it's bitter. Okay, so in a lot of ways that really it helps, but it's hard in the beginning, but it's better in the long run.
So I want to talk a little bit about the psyche, though, because something that I struggled with very early on when my father passed away was there was a brief moment of time when I was like, the whole world is against me. And that's not true, right? Of course, there are a lot of people that supported, and whether it's like, you know, to be there for you mentally, whether it's to like be there for you financially, or just like, hey, I'm here for you, right, in any capacity. But like when you have like the bill that's due, they don't care that your father passed away.
Yeah.
They don't. The light still has to get paid. So like I really felt like that gravity and weight of like, you know, the world is constructed in a way that it doesn't matter what my situation is. I have to look at what cards are on my table and then play them the best way that I can.
Yeah.
Did you agree with that philosophy? And like how did you really like manage like not only trying to take lead of the sort of the family relationships mentally, the financially, how did you like manage all those different aspects? Is a lot.
Well, I remember distinctly. That's when I saw somewhere, I was at a store and I see the autobiography of Malcolm X. Okay, and I see this book, right, and it's the first book I voluntarily ever read. Okay, so to be honest with you, know, so I see this book and then I start reading his story, and it's a story of tragedy to triumph in a lot of ways, you know. Okay, from being a bright young boy, okay, and but not given the opportunities, okay, in life, you know, and then going to prison and then finding him another identity, okay, and moving beyond that and becoming a statesman in a lot of ways, right? So I saw his journey, especially this metaphor we were talking about, conking his hair, okay, and most people don't know what that means, but where African Americans, they put hot wax on their hair to make it straight. Okay, and basically that chapter really had a major impact on me, you know. Okay, and especially then also like one thing about my childhood, I always prayed. I never missed prayer. Okay, so that also led to a lot of comfort, yeah. And I think you have to have an outlet as a, you know. And one thing that most people don't realize, like when you lose a father figure, a patriarch in the family, okay, what happens is the family structure really crumbles, okay, and it becomes, and in my family, it just became like such this disintegration that financially there's no other option for me, because you know the other people that came in and were taking the family money away because my father wasn't there, and it was really, really upsetting, you know. Okay, and so I just knew that I had to forge my own path, you know. Okay, have this restaurant, okay, and be able to like use this, okay. And most people, and I remember like in order for me to be extraordinary in this restaurant, okay, I had to do two things, right? One is that first, like most restaurants, it's like a mousetrap. You want people to come in, okay. And I said, no, I want to bring our KFC to the people, Okay, so I was first person ever really come up with a catering program. There'd be a Grubhub before, and there were hotels near my restaurant. Okay, and then I always go there and then tell the manager, listen, it's okay if I put a menu in every room, like a Motel 6. Okay, and so I'll be getting like $10 orders, right? And one thing Cerritos is known for, the city where my restaurant was, okay, was known for, it sells the most cars in the world. So it has these big auto dealerships. Okay, so I remember going to the auto dealerships and saying, listen, can I cater you guys, right? I remember the sales manager telling me, do you guys accept POs? And I was 18, 19. I said, I don't know what PO is, right? I said, yeah, we accept POs. And I thought PO meant pissed off. Like, I didn't know. Okay, and then, anyway, so I said, yeah, we accept POs, right? Okay, and then, and I realized that we were selling like $300, $400, $500. This is back in the 90s, right? So, okay, and anyhow, so then I would get these big orders, okay, and I would start catering to these dealerships, right? Okay, and then I realized, well, that's Monday through Friday business, right? So what about? And this is before the store opened. Okay, so I was generating a lot of revenue doing that. And I said, well, let me start getting into doing school lunches. Okay, and then I would go to the district and I would meet the city councilors, meet the ABC school district, which is the school district that our stores were in, right? Okay, and so I started doing Monday through Friday catering to like maybe 18 schools in the district, school lunches.
That's awesome.
Okay, and so I was the first person to ever bring like school lunches. It was like chicken strips, sometimes roasted chicken, sometimes it was fried chicken, right? Okay, it'd be like small boxes. Okay, and so I was doing maybe thousands of dollars before the store would open. Okay, so just doing school lunches, doing catering on dealerships. Okay, and then I would get halal, special requests on halal, right? Okay, and then so I said, and I realized the halal, there's no one doing halal. And I remember back when I was growing up, there's no halal available back then. You're talking about like right now, and we live in, every kid has a lot of like food choices, right? So back in like 90s, especially in 80s, there's nothing,
Yeah,
Okay.
my dad, sorry, he's sorry. This is back in like maybe late 80s, early 90s, and there's a photo in our family photo album, and it's him and my uncle, and they're essentially like making something. They're slaughtering a chicken, like Zabia halal, in the bathtub, like defeathering and everything. I'm like, Mom, what's going on here? She's like, back then. I'm like, what?
This is as Texan as it gets.
Yeah. This is I think in Illinois when we lived back there, right?
That's funny.
I was like, and there's another photo of my uncle like hanging a deer or a goat off the balcony. And letting it get drained, and probably they call the cops. So like, because I think this is right when
Kind of Scarface almost.
Yeah. Who's that famous killer that at that time? Ted something.
Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy. Yeah, this was in that era, and they're like, "Oh my God, we have a Ted Bundy like duplicate." I'm like, "No, it's just a ghost."
All right, that's kind of okay.
But yeah. I mean, to your point though, right? Like, we're so blessed now, alhamdulillah, of all the availability, but back then it was extremely a challenge.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that people were asking for halal back then in the areas that you were at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I remember like that, and I said, well, and then I became very serious about halal, right? The problem back then was like if you go to the meat store, because the KFC average chicken size was 2 to 3 pounds, okay, because because sometimes when you get these really big chickens, it doesn't taste good, right? Okay, like and most halal stores they sell by the weight, so they want to sell the heaviest weighted chicken, but for our fryers at KFC, it was supposed to be a 2-3 pound chicken. Okay, so we're getting 5-pound chickens trying to put in, and you get these monster legs, and I mean, it didn't taste right? So I knew ultimately that I had to become vertically integrated. Okay, so I started like cutting my own chicken at a Buddhist slaughterhouse. Okay, and it happened at a Buddhist slaughterhouse in L.A. Cut my chicken, and then I bought a USDA building. I bought a building and I converted to a USDA, and I would take that chicken from that slaughterhouse. Okay, and then take it to our USDA facility and get it ready for KFC, prep it. Okay, and then I would take it to my restaurants. And then I remember, and I would do line item pricing, meaning that I wouldn't charge any extra for halal. Okay, so it'd be the same price, and it just took off. The pricing is right, and I remember people driving from Santa Barbara, hundreds of miles, Arizona, San Diego, kids in the neighborhood were
So the
going
demand
crazy.
was very high.
The demand was very high,
Yeah.
and I just took at one point I had the highest volume restaurants. Okay, and it was and I remember distinctly it was like, man, this is amazing. And I remember those. I had 4 restaurants and a Taco Bell. It was a KFC Taco Bell. Okay, and there was such high volume. Okay, that I had about 100 employees 25 restaurant per, 25 employees per restaurant. So it was really a high volume. And
how old were you at this point?
I think maybe 25.
25.
25
Wow.
years
So,
old.
I mean, there's a couple things that I do want to talk about with this journey, right? Like you started with one restaurant and then you kind of expanded, and it's very clear that you've always had like a very high level focus, right? Like in terms of like you're coming up with innovative ideas, creative ways to like increase your top line, like you're building partnerships with schools for lunch programs and expanding your catering business. I think the challenge that a lot of people have, or there's a very small percentage of people who go into purchasing a franchise or a restaurant, they get sucked into the day-to-day of that restaurant, right? And then they kind of are just focused on that one. What was your process like to really be able to have time and flexibility to really give yourself that extra, hey, I want to expand this? Like, what was your process looking like, right? And you're very young at this age, right? So,
Well, I could tell you that, I mean, with franchising or with the restaurants, I mean, there's 2 ways to manage a restaurant, right? Okay, one is to manage the restaurant, or manage the people that manage the restaurant. Okay, and I remember I had two young employees, okay, and that came in, right? Okay, and one was a cook that just came in, and his name was Jaime, okay, and I remember when I met him, I said, and I knew internally that if I get 2 good employees, if I can manage them really, really well, okay, and then they'll do the rest. And what I did was like I would have daily meetings with I call them general managers, right? Okay, and he's a young kid, he was 18, 19, but by the time he became manager for my restaurant, he was 20 years old, right? And I would remember he would say yes to everything. And sometimes I say, no, that's not a good idea, but we should do this. Okay, so, and I remember when he came along, that was, so I learned early on, the more you communicate, I think the key is get buy-in from your employees. And the only way to get buy-in is to understand where they're coming from. And I would ask each one of my employees, what are your dreams? What do you want to accomplish? And a lot of people have the same dreams that we have as owners, right? Or anybody. Like, I want to make enough money for my family. I want to do well. I want to be financially stable, right? So I said, let's do that together. Okay, so with Jaime's case, I tell him, listen, what do you want? What are your dreams? I want to get married and get a car and get a nice place, Okay, this is how we're going to do it. And I said, in order to do that, we need to increase revenue. Okay, and then and I know fundamentally in business and in life, if you give people what they want, they'll give you what you want. Fundamental rule, right? Okay, and anyhow, so it's just I focused on building him up, okay, and giving him the resources, right? Okay, and then when we got to about 100 employees, right? So we had 2 general managers and we had 4 managers, right? And then we have employees. Okay, so I would make sure that I talk to my general managers daily. Okay, and then I'll go out and I'll have meetings with our 4 managers and 2 general managers. We'll sit down and talk, right? And then we'll have once a month store-wide employee meetings. Okay, and I would go to every store. And so I knew that part of it was just getting buy-in. And if you get buy-in, it's a major thing, right? And they saw the business growing. It's exciting when you see, like, you're starting your school lunches, start doing catering. We started doing, Islamic schools were being built because they were asking for us to cater, right? There'd be like Pakistan Day, in not India, but Pakistan Day. We started doing catering for that, right? And KFC was such a treat. And the one thing about KFC was it was okay when it was cold. Like a burger, you can't eat cold. A pizza, you can't eat cold, right? But KFC, you can eat cold. And back in the day, KFC was a kitchen where you can cook. Okay, until they changed the recipe in a lot of ways, right? But really, it was a really a golden era, and that was like a.
So was there like a profit sharing incentive? Because you mentioned like increasing revenue and allowing them, like, did they get buy-in and so like a fractional equity? Like what was the structure for them to, like, okay, cool, business is increasing, but is my hourly wage increasing? Like, how could you expand on that a bit more?
Well, I remember. Oh yeah. Once the pie is big enough, yeah. And I always did it through hourly or salary, one of the two. And the reason why I think is because, I was still young. I didn't understand ownership. I just knew that ownership had to be, and I was always afraid of having, because I remember like I think it's really maybe a South Asian Indian mentality to have 100% ownership of things and control, right? Maybe that's what I'm not sure if the cultural thing or not, but I remember it don't just keep everything under your name, right? And in fact, and even like it's an old school thing that people say don't share your financials, but I just knew that if you get the right people, you pay them well, and they know that you got their back, and they. I think that's what it is, okay? And I remember Jaime and actually most of my employees, they said they were the best boss I ever had, okay? And a lot of it is, and I remember I was young just like them, okay? And I remember how like my parents told me how my parents believed in me. I use that same mentality of believing in them, okay? And I really made an effort to make sure that they were getting paid well, okay? And they have lunch breaks together, like, and that free food for anybody, and you want to take some home. It was because when you're getting a revenue, it's a lot easier to be generous.
So one of the things, you're 25, your business is booming, right? But there's of course our South Asian responsibilities, and just as sons, like, were you taking care of mom? Were you guys all living together under one roof? Was there, and of course this is very typical, unfortunately, but tension with family when someone gets financial success, like what was all of that dynamic like? Because you're the younger son, right? Are you the youngest of the three?
Yeah.
So there's all these stereotypical buckets that we may fall into, right? What was life like at home at that point, and how did you navigate that while maybe grieving, all these other elements?
Well, I mean, when my dad passed away, like my sister got married, right, and she did well with her career. She became a CPA, right, okay, and then my mother, she stayed with me, okay, and she just became very vulnerable. When you become a widow, it's just it changes, right, okay, and I remember my brother, he was upset that we spent the family money, and then at some point he said to me, that you owe me half of the restaurant. Okay, and even though he didn't participate, okay, and I remember him, unfortunately, he sued me for that. Okay, so then, okay, and then I remember paying him a large sum of money for it. Okay, and then he asked for interest as well, which really just it's really upsetting, and then. But but I just realized that, like I just remember if I just give him what he wants, that's it. Okay, and I just knew that, and I realized that, and everyone in life goes through troubles and challenges, right? But then I realized early on, it's just overcome it, and I realized, especially in business, especially in life, you have to overcome the problems. Okay, one way or the other, right? Okay, and I also knew that part of as a Muslim, part of our faith is to not put everything on our own shoulders, but put it on Allah's shoulders, metaphorically, right? So that's part of it, okay? And having an optimism that you can resolve it, okay? And I knew deep down inside that no human being can make me or break me, fundamentally. Okay, so in some way, it creating a raging bull inside me to work hard, and I know I heard this once. Okay, I heard it recently again when I met Khabib Nurmagomedov. Right, he said that the harder your life is in the beginning, okay, the farther you're going to go in life. So sometimes if it's hard, it means that if you can overcome that, imagine how more powerful you'll be. That's what happened to me. So every challenge I had, and my family dynamics, and growing up, my mother became so proud of me. Right, okay, and so growing up, she would make the greatest food, and then after my dad passed away, so I would go to a different restaurant. They're about, each one maybe like 5, 10, 15 miles away from each other, right? So she would come in the morning, get ready, she would come in the car, and it'd be Riaz and his mom, okay, and I could see how happy she was, and so I became my goal was to make her laugh, right? So I would say like just different jokes about, okay, and just to make her laugh, because she was going, when you become a widow, you feel like, oh man, this just my husband passed away, my life is over, right? But I would try to make her laugh, and then I remember like she would laugh, and then she said, "Can you take me to the nearest Ross?" Okay, so okay, I'll take you to the nearest Ross. Okay, can you pick me up in 30 minutes, or take me to this fabric store? She should make all her own clothes, right? Okay, and so I'll take her to Ross, and it just became like a daily habit of mine. And then even I would go to different parties, franchise meetings, and she'll come with me, be Riaz's mom. Okay, and then it was really and I realized maybe the fact that I was good to my mother, that brought so much blessings to me. Yeah, subhanAllah.
I mean, I'm a firm believer of that, yeah, I'm starting to get emotional a little bit. But may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless our moms. They do a lot for us. There's like a unique now that my wife has a child, I understand that aspect as a parent too. And like, man, like mothers, they're very special. And I firmly believe that their dua like goes so far, man. May Allah really give them long, healthy lives, and inshallah we're all reunited in Jannah for those with them. So at this time, you're like building your empire of like multiple restaurants, and you're kind of growing. You're facing some challenges along the journey. So you're like up to the point of like where you're 25, 26, like you mentioned. What comes next after that? Like, what was the transition from going from restaurants and kind of being in that space and continuing to grow there to like another industry? Like, what was in that time period for you?
Okay, so around 2007, 8, 9, around there, I was getting conflicts, pushback from KFC for doing halal. Okay, and
so they weren't fans that you were doing halal.
They weren't fans, right? Okay, so one of the reasons why I became vertically integrated, so I could be under compliance with KFC, right? Okay, and so I started. Let me start cutting my own chicken, bring it to my own slaughterhouse, come to KFC specs, because and then. And I remember telling my area manager at the time that we're doing this, right? And he said, okay, I'll give you a temporary. Yes. Okay, at that time, business was, and I said, look how much we're growing. And I even told him that halal is a standard internationally. What's the resistance? Okay, and so initially was fine. And they didn't expect it to grow it the way I was growing. I came to the point where I was doing so much catering. You're talking about 4 restaurants pumping. And it's unbelievable numbers. Okay, and these were stores that, didn't have drive-throughs. These were inlet stores, like inside shopping centers, right? But they were packed to the max. Anyhow, so then I remember like getting a letter from KFC saying that you had discontinued the halal food program. Actually, a call I got from them. Okay, and I happened to be at Hajj at the time, and I had one of those old brick phones, right? So like, okay, and this is around 2004, 2004, right? Okay, 2004. I got the timeline wrong, but 2004, I got a call from KFC. They listen, you need to discontinue the halal food program. Okay, and I remember I was at Hajj, and then I came back, and I told my mom that I just don't believe in KFC anymore. I think they're making a lot of big mistakes, and at the time they're also changing the recipe from a kitchen that used to make everything in house to bringing in everything more frozen. Okay, and I remember we used to make biscuits from scratch, cut our own cabbage for coleslaw, right? Okay, and make fresh mashed potatoes and gravy, right? And then it was all coming in pre-made, kind of like Taco Bell style. And at that time, the restaurant business was like. Like Chipotle was coming around, everything was being made at the restaurant. And then Subway had a thing called Eat Fresh.
Express and
So they were just doing the opposite, and they wanted the KFC to be more like Taco Bell. Okay, and I think doing that it really ruined the brand, right? Okay, and that's why like Cane's and Chick-fil-A and Dave's Hot Chicken are just completely dominate the market now. Okay, and I remember telling I told my mom I just don't believe in KFC anymore. And she told me, you're making a lot of money. Are you sure? I said, yeah, I just don't believe in it, And then when I got the call from KFC saying discontinue the halal food program, and I happened to be at Hajj, and I looked at the Kaaba, and I said, oh, this is a sign. Okay, and then I called my nearest franchisee. He had 17 stores. I said, listen, I have 4 stores here, and a Taco Bell, right? Would you be interested? Okay, and he says yes. And these are high volume restaurants, and so I sold him the restaurant, right? Okay, and then and it took me about a week to sell it. I sell it for maximum. I mean, and I even told him, listen, my sales are inflated because it's halal. And he said, I don't care. These are really amazing stores, right? Anyway, so then I sell them the stores, right? Okay, and I have a whole lot of money with me, right? Because I pay off my house, I pay off the building. I bought this USDA building for me, and then
This is all post the legal case with your brother.
yeah, no,
after?
the legal case happened in the '90s, right?
Okay.
After my second store.
Gotcha. So that's just like
Yeah,
far
this is-
gone.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and then so that was so I think he sued me too early. I think to be honest with you, it's a blessing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then anyhow, so then
Let me write that down.
okay, and anyhow, so then so in 2005 I sell it. Okay, and then I have this big facility. Okay, and my mom was an incredible cook. I remember growing up, she would be making ghee, and I never knew why are you making ghee? Why are you taking butter and melting it? Okay, and then she'd make samosas from scratch. Yeah, she would make the pastry, And I said, man, and then I would go to the Indian stores, right? Indian Pakistani stores. I would see Indian food there, like samosas and stuff like that. Okay, and I said, let me see if I could take samosas mainstream, to Whole Foods, to Costco, to Sam's Club. Okay, so I told my mom, can you make some samosas for me? And then I got a tip. That the buyer of Whole Foods goes in at work at 4 a.m. in the morning. Okay, so I sent him an email. I want to meet you at 4:30 in the morning, and he happened to be in the Bay Area. Okay, in San Francisco. Okay, and the Whole Foods corporate office. And each at that time, each region had their own corporate office, right? So, okay, and I knew around 2004 or 5, a lot of Indian, South Asian immigrants were coming to Bay Area to work in technology, right? So I thought maybe I could sell samosas to them. And at the time, there was no Indian food at Whole Foods. This is about 2004, 2005, Okay, and I said, and at the time I was having trouble with KFC as well, right? So I was thinking my exit as well, right? Okay, so let me get into making samosas, okay, for Whole Foods and bring it mainstream Indian food. And these were halal, by the way. Okay, so I meet this buyer, and I meet him at 4 o'clock in the morning. And one thing I learned in sales is that usually, like, you want to mimic the person that you're selling to. So if he's an early bird, you have to pretend you're an early bird. If he's laughing, you got to be laughing. I mean, you got to imitate the person you're selling to, right? So he probably said, "Who is this guy who wants to meet 4:30 in the morning?" Okay, and so he sent me an email back. Yeah, I'll meet you. Okay, I'll meet you at 4:30 in the morning. Okay, and I remember driving the night before to Whole Foods. Okay, and with some samosas, right? Okay, and I was gonna fry him at the hotel and bring him to him, right? Okay, I let a little fry, right? Okay, and then, I get there, okay, and then I meet him, and he said, "Are you an early bird?" "Yeah, I'm an early bird," which I wasn't. Right? I'm an early bird. Yes, I really, I wake up all the time.
I eat samosas for breakfast in the morning at 4:30 every day.
I'm just thinking, what if the person that gave you that tip just hates that guy, and he's been spreading this rumor, and now he's constantly in this cycle, having to wake up. It's like, I don't know why people always meet at 4:30.
No, but what had to happen? He was happy. He was one of the most good-natured person I ever met, and he's the one that really gave me the break, right? The Whole Foods, right? And then, so I meet this guy, and I said, "Listen, I made some samosas for you," and he said, "No, it's 4:30. I don't want to eat samosas at 4:30 in the morning, but I will eat it." He said, and he asked me one question. It's hard to get into Whole Foods, okay? But first, it's hard to get in, right? But how are you going to stay in? And I asked me one more question: why should we buy your products? And one thing, when you can't say we're the best, I'm the best, this, that, like people who can say that, right? And I remember telling him that I'm going to demo the products in your store. Okay, at that time, Whole Foods had maybe 25, 30 stores, maybe 25 stores in the Bay Area at the time, So I'll drive every weekend, okay, and I'll demo the products at your stores. I'll do 3 stores at a time. So within a week, within 2 weeks, or actually within a month, I'll be able to sample all your stores every weekend. Okay, and he said that's really good because he said when people try your product, you're gonna do all right. Okay, and then what happened was I was going in there, and then I also contacted Costco. There's a thing called the roadshow, which is you come in on the weekends, you sample your products, and you leave by Monday. Okay, so you see like this road setup. You have this bunch of tables and some bunch of products, right? Okay, and I remember calling the Costco buyer, okay, in the Bay Area. He said, I want to demo samosas, and he happened to know what they were. Like he was like a white guy that just knew a lot about Indian food. Okay, and this is like we're talking about early 2000s, right? So this is okay. It's still a novelty Indian food. It's not ubiquitous as it is now, right? So and then I'm handing thousands of samosas, right? I would tell everyone, listen, if you can't buy it here next week, go to your local Whole Foods in the Bay Area and get them there. Okay, and and the Whole Food stores, samosas just took off. Okay, it was just part of it was just strategy, part of it was just, and I think if you think about the concept of idea, how an idea come in your mind, everything comes really from a divine source. Like a seed that Allah puts in your mind. So, I can say how great I am, but in the end, it was some sort of revelation that, if I'm going to have my stores, and instead of just demoing all these stores, I had tens of thousands of samosas, okay, every weekend. And tell them go, and then the Costco sales went up, the Whole Food stores went up. It just ended up being a really great, just a great cross-marketing. Yeah.
Well, so you're essentially making a samosa brand through and through at this point. Did you have a machine making all of these?
Good point,
I assume it's not your mom making all these because you mentioned as a poor woman.
No, good question. Yeah. So I go to Japan, right? Okay, and I tell them that. And the reason I went to Japan because I saw this is pre-internet, so you have to really struggle to get information. There's no Okay, so I thought maybe they make egg roll machines, right? So I take it and I would describe. People ask what samosas were. I just call them Indian egg rolls. That's what I would call it, right? You're talking about
I've never heard that before.
That's brilliant, though.
Yeah, Indian egg rolls.
Yeah.
Indian egg rolls, but in triangle form.
Yeah.
So that's what I would. So I just felt okay, maybe, and then I would just do. I mean, there was pre-internet, but but there's still I'll go on the computer and then look for manufacturers, especially egg roll manufacturers in Japan. I don't know why I thought Japan, right? Okay, so I went and I meet this one company and I tell them, can you convert this egg roll machine into making samosas? Okay, and to their credit, they design an egg roll machine that makes samosa, and it's a folded samosa. And I didn't know what the kind of samosas were like. It looked like an empanada, you basically put this filling in the middle, and you just
It's more like it's like a stamper.
Yeah,
right?
stamp.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I'm talking about, right? So I just it wasn't authentic for me. I wanted a crispy, high quality samosa. Okay, and I knew they existed because I would go to Indian store, and I knew that I would see those brands, mini cocktail samosas made from potatoes, right? Okay, and I said, no, I want to do chicken, I want to do beef, I want to do lamb, and I wanted to do potatoes. Okay, and so I just started doing samosas. Okay, and then I got this machine, and it cost about $350,000. This machine, right? Okay, and I had money because I sold the restaurants, right? Okay, so I buy this machine, okay, and try cranking out the best samosas. They're literally and the same samosas you see at Trader Joe's, the same quality samosas. It's the same company that makes our samosas. I mean that bought my company over. Okay, and that's the same brand. Okay, and once I got the Trader Joe's, I'll step back a little bit. Once I got the Trader Joe's contract, right, I knew the order was too big for me. Okay, and then I get approached by this company and said, would you be interested in selling your company? I said, yes.
So was the reason for that because of just the volume to support the PO
Yeah.
was just so massive
Yeah.
that you needed to rehaul your infrastructure and your entire assembly line and production? And then you had to is that kind of what the thought process was at that time?
Well, I was getting a nice payoff. Okay, and I thought it cost me $350 worth of machine. The distribution, I really worked hard to get the distribution. Okay, and I'm getting a good dollar amount. Okay,
How many years was that in?
This is about 2010.
10, and you ran that operation for
5 years.
5 years.
Okay, and it was a nice payout, right? Okay, but it wasn't good. It wasn't at the time. I thought it was good, because they weren't buying the business. They were buying the distribution. I didn't realize distribution was so valuable. Get Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, Costco.
Like having those relationship channels.
Oh,
already
that was
established.
yeah.
So then I just knew that I undersold it completely.
So
I
what
just-
makes you say that it wasn't as good of a deal as you could have gotten? Is it more so because of the potential that was still remaining to grow it more if you had
yes.
stayed?
Well, that could end up being $30-40 million now.
30. Okay, got
30
it.
to 40 million, right?
Yeah.
So then I remember, I thought, okay, I'll tell my mom. And at the time, I'm young too. But then you start realizing, so, one thing I told myself is that it's okay to make mistakes in life, in anything, but don't make it twice. Mm-hmm. That's really critical. It's okay because in the end, you don't have perfect knowledge. You make the best decision at the time with the knowledge that you have, and just move forward, right? And I also learned something good as any good businessman, make quick decisions in a lot of ways. After they don't keep analysis paralysis. Okay, and then also I am a very confident person, right? I said if I could do it once, I could do it again. And I remember Mark Cuban had a quote. He said, "All you need to do is be right once." Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect quote for him to say.
Yeah, right. And that's right. Because he did really well, right?
Yeah. Maybe try. Yeah. So, and what was your age? You mentioned you were very young at this
30,
time when you're
30.
30.
Yeah.
Okay.
30,
that was your
right?
second exit, more or less.
Yeah, my second exit, right? Okay, and then I said, let me start doing gluten-free pies and cheesecakes. So I went to the same Whole Foods buyer. His name was Brad, right? I said, Brad, what do you need? What do you want next? What can I do for you? And he said, well, I think gluten-free is a good thing to do. Gluten-free, and I said, is it a fad or is it here to stay? Okay, and I think he said it's here to stay. Okay, and I said, what do you recommend? He said, well, we need pie shells. We need gluten-free pie. And at the time, the knock on gluten-free, it didn't taste good. Mm-hmm. It tastes awful. It tastes like cardboard, right? Okay, and then I remember. Incidentally, my mother told me, "Hey, would you be can you buy some chana flour from the grocery store?" Okay, and I said, "Well, what if I use Indian flours to make gluten-free desserts?" Okay, because China.
Your mom is the source of all these.
Yeah, but it was but it's unrelated to pies.
Yeah,
just
yeah,
go,
yeah.
right? Okay, but I think also all the time I was spending time with her. The time driving with her, talking to her, right?
Yeah.
So he said, so just, and so I think it was all, and I have a really good memory, so I just remember things really well. Okay, and I said, okay, and then well, let me go to the Indian store, buy some chana flour, and it took me about 3 to 4 weeks to come up with a recipe, and I give it to Brad, and I say, here's a pie shell, and he says, pretty good. How much do you want to sell it for, And I said, how much you want to buy it for? He said, we're buying gluten-free pies from some another vendor. We're paying $15 a pie and $10 for a pie shell. Okay, I said, who's going to? And gluten-free was really, Whole Foods were really getting into it, right? Okay, and then, I said, all right, let me, I could do it for half the price, Okay, I started making pumpkin pies, apple pies, and pie shells.
So when you said you could do it for half the price, I mean, that's a really bold statement, right?
Yeah.
What was your thought process about how you're going to negotiate this? Was it that you were trying to go for volume, like you were like, hey, we can do it for half the price, but you have to hit this much volume, or was it just, hey, I just need that another distribution network? Like, what was kind of going through your mind at that time?
Well, I just realized, I just realized that in order to, but one thing about Brad, he said, listen, if you have price, I'll give you the corner. I forgot what the word is, but the corner right in front of the store, the corner, okay, where right where the freezer begins, wherever the door is at. Okay, I forgot what the area was called, right? Okay, and it's been a long time. So
they gave you a high traffic area.
High traffic area, and okay, right. Okay, so and they're pushing gluten free, and one thing also is that like most grocery stores, not Whole Foods, but other stores, like you're not selling them products. Like Whole Foods, they're buying products from you and taking it, and they pay you for it, right? But most grocery stores, they're selling you rent, rent space.
Yeah. Okay,
so you give a bunch of free products. Okay, if it sells, okay, then you're actually paying rent space for that freezer space. And one thing about freezer business and grocery frozen line is a zero sum game. So if you go in, someone has to go out. Okay, so that's a different kind of model, right? Okay, so even when the samosas were coming frozen, so I knew, and more samosas I was selling. Okay, that real estate becomes very, very important because they're taking somebody out. There's only so many doors that they have, right? So I knew a lot. So when he said, "Listen, I'll give you," I call it end caps. I give the end cap of the aisle, meaning it's right at the front of the aisle. Okay, and I said, "You give me end caps if I do," and I said, "I'm not paying any fees. I'm not paying any advertising fee. I just want to go in, come in as a holiday item, and then go out. Okay, and I'm not going to advertise. You just put it in the front of the store." So I knew it was going to sell. Okay, and that's okay. The volume's going to be there, right? And also part of it is like making quick decisions. You don't have to analyze it. Listen, I'm going to get 30 at the time, 35, 40 stores. Whole at 2010, right? They're expanding like crazy, right? Okay, and then and I knew that I'll get to other natural stores, right? Okay, so let me start doing pie shells, apple pie, and go into a seasonal item and leave. I didn't want to care if I stayed or not. So it'd be a big third, fourth quarter business, right? Okay, and also at the same time I also had a big facility, and big USDA facility, which I turned into an FDA facility, right? Okay, and then. So I started just doing that, okay, and I said, let me start doing halal chicken pies. That'll be my next product, okay, and these are all halal items. Even the samosas are halal. They're the first person. I remember going to store. I was so proud. I saw halal on the box, okay, and anyway, so but even and most pies, people don't realize most pies are made out of lard. Marie Calendar pies.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So most people don't know. Like it, and so in fact, I'll make it a halal pie. I'll put a halal logo on that product, right? Okay, and. Because especially Marie Callender's, not all of them. Even Cheesecake Factory have lard in some of their pies, right? It just because of lard's a cheap oil, and it's easier to get a flaky crust out of it, right? So okay, and so I said, let me do a halal pie, again, then a halal chicken pot pie. So I got a bunch of these stores, right? Okay, and then
You had a halal chicken pot pie.
I had a halal chicken pot pie back then, right?
I love chicken pot pies. So.
Yeah, it was delicious, right? To be honest with you.
I'm too late.
and then also I also knew that with the samosa machine, it was a high tech machine, right? But the pie business, I could buy those machines. These were all like I just bought a bunch of like smaller machines, like make 10 of them, and pie presses, and started making pie presses, yeah, and just putting tops on them. It was a little bit less like a low tech manufacturing, right? Okay, so I tried doing low tech manufacturing, but it was a I knew it was a high volume business, low margin, high volume business. We get to the grocery stores, right? Okay, and my goal was never to pay for slotting fees. Slotting fees is like a way to give them free product, you have to pay them. It's kind of like you have to pay them to get your product to get distribution, right? So, okay, and then I meet Albertsons, which is a nice store chain in Southern California. They had about 10 stores at a time, right? Okay, and then you get bought over by a company called Vaughn's Safeway, and it turns into a 300 store order, 300 stores. Okay, and at one point it was so hard to do this because I'm making pies and cheesecakes, and I need to get more automated, right? Okay, and then I get a call from an investment company, actually from a lawyer. That's how you know when you're getting serious. When you get a call from a lawyer, and he said, "Listen, I want to buy your business. We want to buy your business, yeah." And then I didn't realize, and I think it was the Marie Callender's people, Marie Callender's, Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith. What happens the more I start expanding, I started doing pies, cheesecakes, pie shells, mini pies, okay, and then I got a call from them, and they're saying, "Listen, we want to buy you out." And what they essentially did was they basically closed they bought it and just ended the company.
Oh wow!
Because they knew that it's a zero sum game, right, in the freezer space. Okay, so it's easier to buy them and end it.
Wow.
So I had another nice exit on that one.
Wow, alhamdulillah. So there's a couple things. So you have a contract with Albertsons. They have 10 stores. They get bought out, and this larger Safeway organization, we're familiar with them, but like they basically have a conglomerate, right? They have 300 stores. When they purchase Albertson, they're going through the deep analytics of like, hey, what product
gluten-free
works well, what doesn't
right.
work well, what do we need to double down on? And then so you go from 10 to 300, and then the purchase order goes like, whoop.
Yeah, it does. Yeah,
which is great, but it's also a problem. It's a good problem.
Yeah,
but it's like, okay, oh my gosh, how do I like increase my production? How do I do that? And is this the time that you get the call from the lawyer, or is it like you had the contract in hand, you were fulfilling 300 stores?
Yeah, it was. I remember I remember when I mean, the first 10 stores were in that year was relatively easy, right? That's around 2011, 12, I think it was, right? Okay, yeah, no problem. Then 2013, and I started building, I started getting into Whole Foods, doing some of their stores, right? Okay, it was a nice business, and it was just all third quarter. So I was started doing in January, February, and build it up, and have a big freezer of inventory, and get rid of it by August, start getting to the distribution, right? Okay, and then it's all low tech, it's all manageable at the time, right? Okay, and then we start getting 250. I even told this I can't do 300 stores. Let me do 50. Let me do 100. The last year, it doesn't. When I got to 300 stores, when the more store count I got, the more threat I became. The bigger I got, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then when I got to 300, and I was like my first purchase order was $500,000. I used $500,000 for pies. This is back in maybe May. They wanted me to start going. Okay, and gluten free was the rage at that time, and it was incredible. Is I'm not paying slotting fees to get in. So I had cheesecakes going through. I had mini pies and pie shells, and I came up with a shelf stable pie shell. You could just put it right in, and you don't have to put it in the freezer anymore. Okay, and so
Well, that's big, right?
that's big, yeah. It
Yeah.
became. So then I had a nice exit on that, and what's amazing was that the problem, it was also making high volume, low margins, and I realized I don't want to be in a high volume, low margin business. I mean, it's just the pies where it's good to do that, right? Okay, and with pies, it takes assembly. You have to get a filler. You have to make the bottom crust, put a filling in, put a top crust. It just required a semi-automatic, semi-manual process. Okay, so it wasn't like fully automated, right? Okay, and to get to fully automation, it cost maybe millions of dollars to get fully automated. Okay, like you see in some of those TV shows, right, where you see the whole process, right? But it's still a semi more handcrafted products, right? And I knew that the higher volume is going to either have to invest in that. And at the time, I was thinking, man, this is too much work. Okay, and then when I got that call, and I also the way you start knowing you're seeing success, initially when you start a company, you'll get no emails, right? Okay, and then second phase, you start getting people who want to sell you stuff, services, right? Email marketing services, right? Now, then the third phase is when you start getting access to money. People want to give you money. Then the fourth phase is when people want to start buying you out, and you start getting calls from lawyers. And not brokers.
I mean, that's a really big thing to have someone purchase you out just so that they can free up more shelf space, right?
Yeah, and I didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just I meet a firm that wants to it's a law firm. They said we want to buy your company out. Okay, how much do you want? And at the time, I learned from the samosa business that they're getting distribution.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not gonna make the same mistake twice. Okay, so
what did you do different this time around?
I just, and at the time also, I didn't like the pie business hard. Either I invest heavily into the pie and make that my life, okay, and not, or just get into all that, right? And I said, well, my thought process was how much you want in it, okay, and I said, and I always had confidence I could if I take that money, I could do something else with it.
Yeah.
I was very confident, and that's one thing. I think part of that confidence really comes from knowing that if Allah says yes, who can say no? In a lot of ways, right? Yeah. And it comes down to that. And I would always answer, if it's not this business, I could do. And I always had this confidence that I could sell furniture, I can make money at it, and I've always had this mentality that I could overcome anything. Okay, and even if it was a good offer, I said, okay, I'll take it. Okay, and it was simple as that. And then once I saw that company, around 2018. So 2019, I was thinking, I want to get into direct consumer products. Okay, and then this all started. So 2008, I have money. Okay, and then 2008, and I said, I want to come up with something really unique. Okay, and where I could really sell well on online. Okay, and I remember telling my friend, I want to get into direct to consumer, online, internet, website, all that. I remember that person telling me, you need to get a new computer. And at the time, I didn't know anything about computers, right? I'm still using DOS, whatever. You're still using, Windows 2000. Windows 2000. I didn't know. I was like, I didn't.
Make it sound like it was 1990 or something.
Yeah, DOS, Windows 2000.
You're talking still about using MIPS.
Atari,
Where's the punch card?
Television. So I saw, okay, then I had a friend of mine that had a really successful online business, right? Okay, selling wedding favors. Okay, and I go to his facility, and he has Dymo printers, he has scanners, he has thousands of products selling wedding favors, right? And I thought, okay, let me do the same thing he's doing. So that's when I started doing Shopify in 2019. Started selling specialty flours, okay, and apple flour, banana flour, sweet potato flour, almond flour, and I would just put them in an ice cream cup, and and then put it in a bag and then put an ice cream cup and cover it and then ship it. Okay, and these are all really colorful packaging, right? Okay, and it came with the name Hearty Foods, right? Okay, and then I started selling flour. Okay, and the good thing about flour is that it doesn't require refrigeration. You could, it's dry and it has long shelf life, right? And I had these big pie ovens. I'll just take apples and cut them into slices and then build them to a flour. So it's all right, perfect business, right? Okay, and I was the first person to ever do banana flour, sweet potato flour. No one's ever doing this. This is all cutting edge stuff.
And this is all still gluten free, right?
All gluten free.
Which, by the way, I'm a big fan of.
Yeah.
Because I have a gluten allergy.
Oh, okay.
That I developed last. Naveed has some stories to share about that at some point.
Oh, yeah.
But no, I think it's interesting. Like, one question that I kind of have is like, this is a little bit of a tangent, but like we're talking about 2010. You mentioned Whole Foods getting into gluten free and sourcing better products and things like that. Like, consumers are starting to care about what they're putting into their body. That's a trend that really, I think, starts in that time period. We're seeing it accelerate over the last 15 years, even more and more, right? What's your thoughts on that in general? Do you think that this is going to be a continual trend? Do you think that there's still 2x, 3x, 4x opportunities there? Do you think that we're at a plateau of like where people, like that people are finding alternative forms of like what they consider good quality ingredients as?
Well, I mean, I think my success also comes with the internet in a lot of ways. Because if you think about what happened with, it's a fragmenting of news information. If you think about it, because a lot of people are getting into home building, especially food shopping network, Food Network. You saw all these different, just so much more news about food. Okay, and more people, you go on the internet, you see just different influencer, that influencer, right? And you start to realize, so what happened was, gluten-free became the rage. Because like all these Instagram pages, gluten-free girl or something, I made this, I have an allergy, whatever. So in a lot of ways, I think our growth was because of the fragmenting and the growth of the internet, in a lot of ways. And if you think about even to answer your question directly, is that as more information comes out, the more there is, the more growth there is, opportunity growth, right? Okay, and also niche products will become mainstream because it depends on how fast you can market them in a lot of ways, right? So, but if I knew that once I got into supplements in 2020, if I knew about supplements back in 2010 or 2005, whatever, I would have been to the supplement business because most people are buying supplements because of psychological reasons. It's not about taste. So it's a different. So I would have gotten into the supplement business a long time ago if I knew about that. Okay, so that's where we are now.
You mentioned how the internet has played a significant role in your success, particularly with the CPG space. Now in the current, time right now, right? AI is like all the talk, right? How do you, for entrepreneurs now, like, how would AI potentially play into a role in this like category of space, food
space,
recipes, and so on and so forth? Or is there a role?
It's actually, I think what AI is, I think now AI has made intelligence free. I mean, just now everyone has perfect knowledge in a lot of ways, right? So the new currency is really attention. Think about it. So so the key really is to get attention. Okay, so what I guess technology can do is it could take a small company and blast it. Okay, so now it's a level playing field. A small company can have the same power as a big company. That's why that's why large corporation, big brands, they can't innovate like a small company now. So in some way, it's technology, AI. This information is free now in a lot of ways. So I think what I would do is especially like now with AI and different technology, you can see the search volumes on certain products. Okay, and you can see how many sellers of that product there is. Okay, so like my whole strategy now is sell everyday products people can use every day. So collagen, creatine, whey protein, bone broth, and I think especially creatine creatine's hot right now. There's so many more studies. AI is really kind of type of creatine. It's good for brain health, good for muscle growth, right? So, okay, and now I'm looking for products that people can use every day. Okay, and people are also buying for psychological to address some sort of issue that they, look good, get muscles, that kind of thing,
So, like let's say that there's someone in the audience or someone who's listening to this podcast, and they want to start a DTC brand now, right? They want to have that advanced distribution network direct to the consumer, and they're trying to figure out what area to focus in on and things like that. They're like at the early stage, let's say. What advice would you give them about the journey that you wish you had when you were getting into this industry?
Well, I think most people think going into retail is a lot of money, but I think we live in a golden age of e-commerce. Okay, and so if you can just come up with a good product that you can mail to a consumer, okay, and and for me, I became Amazon centric. I'm a focused brand because back in 2019, people were saying, listen, why don't you just focus on Shopify and just promote your products on Shopify, because there are Warby Parkers out there that did really well. There are other like Project Runway that are selling products on their website. And I remember looking at statistics saying that Amazon gets 1 billion customers a week. I said, there's no way. Okay, so then what happened when I started selling gelatin, going back to gelatin, right? I just sold it as a grass-fed bovine gelatin with a big cow on the bag. Okay, it was a white packaging, Okay, and collagen, halal collagen, and these were high search terms, but nobody selling them, no company selling it. Okay, so let me be the first. Okay, and then I remember putting it in a white bag and putting it on Amazon. And I remember the search volume, and Amazon, nothing but a search engine is what it is, right? So like halal collagen, I would pop up. Okay, and I just kept growing. And to be honest with you, I wasn't my goal wasn't only for the halal consumer base. I did halal for my own purposes, for people like my mom to benefit from that. Okay, and then but the gelatin's what took off, because I think it's because people realized that pork gelatin's not good. Okay, and people are buying bovine gelatin that's grass-fed. Okay, and that's what took and alhamdulillah. And that's one thing about also, like, you don't know the future. If you're talking about direct-to-consumer, I think you just launch products and let the marketplace kind of determine where to go. So, I thought maybe collagen would be number one, or cholesterol, right? Okay, but gelatin ended up being number one for me. And now I think I'm number one on agar-agar, which is vegan gelatin. Agar, which is like made from red algae, and then creatine. I think we're top 10 on creatine sales, right? So there's a lot of growth, and I just part of it is it's just I call it phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Phase 1, just start the product. Phase 2, just make the changes, make changes, or make the adjustments, I would say, and then phase 3, make money.
Well, Riaz, this is incredible to hear all of your entrepreneurial endeavors and how it kind of pieces together, going from KFC to samosas to pies, and now, of course, being in the supplement industry. Right. And I think, as someone who lives a very active lifestyle, who study nutrition, it's something I very admire, especially people who are Muslim who are entering the space, and so necessary for within our communities, more and so being conscious of being healthy and making those choices available to us. So Jazakallah khairan for everything that you've built. It truly does serve all of humanity, and I think that's something that we really admire. But we appreciate the insight that you kind of gave and lens what inspires you, what's driven you, how you got to where you are. So with that, thank you for joining the Caravan Podcast.
That's my pleasure.